Just responding right now to a note from the dictator, the soon-to-be former dictator of Washington State, Jay Inslee. Just a little bit of a personal note back to him because he's lying. Sorry about that. Good morning or afternoon, wherever you're at. I know this is time shifted. We're going to talk about the alleged of the healthcare CEO because, of course, he was caught yesterday, alleged. But we're not going to say his name because people like this want their name said. But I will read you a book review he apparently wrote. And guess which author he was reviewing. I'll give you a hint. He lived in a tiny little shack, but is still to this day very, very famous. So we'll talk about that. We also need to talk about life without Daniel Pennies and what that can look like. I'll share with you a story where I didn't play a Daniel Penny world because I wasn't at any risk. But if me and my friends hadn't been there, I want you to think about what could have happened. Well, not could have, what would have happened without us being there. In the second show today, we'll get straight into the Daniel Penny story. We'll do all of this with the help of our somewhat censored YouTube channel, youtube.com/@TheToddHermanShow, and our free speech platform. That's thetoddhermanshow.substack.com. And, of course, all of it is impossible without God Almighty. Thank you, Lord.
The Todd Herman Show is 100% disapproved by big pharma, technocrats, and tyrants everywhere. No. From the high mountains of free America, here's the Emerald City exile, Todd Herman.
Today is the day the Lord has made, and these are the times to which God has decided we shall live. You might notice, if you're a sharp-eyed viewer of the video product, that there are actually two glasses, or tumblers. I think we're legally supposed to call them tumblers on the desk. Yeah, it's going to be this will be the 1632. This will be the 40, what's going on the 48th ounce of some Bone Frog coffee this morning. Sometimes you need a little extra coffee. So the guy who allegedly shot the CEO, and I know this is going to shock a lot of people, is apparently a leftist, anti-capitalist, and also a guy who loved him some Ted Kaczynski. And this is something to behold if you're not aware of this. Kaczynski continues to be, in fact, increasingly a hero for a lot of people on the eco-left. So this guy was a climate change alarmist, apparently, according to his social media posts, and he, of course, went to a private school. You know this. He's a college graduate. He is from, Penn? And he's a computer programmer. So he lives in the world of information and theory. He lives in the worlds of bits and bytes. But I'm just watching him in this alleged video of him allegedly the CEO, super calm guy. So maybe he's always been a sociopath, or maybe he practiced this. But listen to his book review on a book called Industrial Society and Its Future. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it's by Ted Kaczynski. And Kaczynski is, he's still alive to this day, and he continues to have people who are becoming enamored with him and continues to receive marriage proposals, etc., and people being influenced by him. I mean, when you have people like Taylor Lorenz excusing the CEO of this healthcare, well, it's not a healthcare company, it's a health stopping company. UnitedHealthcare is a disgrace. It's a disgusting company. And that doesn't mean you get to go to the CEO, but Taylor Lorenz, liberal former Washington Post reporter, saying, well, you can see why we want these people dead or murdered. And she wasn't alone in that. A lot of people expressed that sentiment. You can see how this young man, further along in the brainwashing of the left, why he thought this was a good idea. And this is why we're not saying his name, because I think he wants his name said. But here's his book review. Clearly written by a mathematics prodigy. Reads like a series of lemmas on the question of 21st century quality of life. It's easy to quickly and thoughtlessly write off this manifesto of a lunatic in order to avoid facing some of the uncomfortable problems it identifies. But it simply is impossible to ignore how prescient many of his predictions about modern society turned out. He was a violent individual, rightfully imprisoned, who maimed innocent people. While these actions tend to be characterized as those of a crazy Luddite, however, they are more accurately seen as those of an extreme political revolutionary. A take I found online that I think is interesting. He had the, quote, well, I'll replace the word with this here with testicles. He had the testicles to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere. And at the end of the day, he's probably right. Oil barons haven't listened to any environmentalists, but they feared him. When all other forms of communication fail, violence is necessary to survive. You may not like this method, but to see things from his perspective, it's not terrorism, it's war and revolution. Fossil fuel companies actively suppress anything that stands in their way, and within a generation or two, it will begin costing human lives by greater and greater magnitudes until the Earth is just a flaming ball orbiting third from the sun. Peaceful protest is outright ignored. Economic protest isn't possible in the current system. So how long until we recognize that violence against those who lead us to such destruction is justified as self-defense? These companies don't care about you or your kids or your grandkids. They have zero qualms about burning down the planet for a buck. So why should I have any qualms about burning them down to survive? We're animals, just like everything else on this planet, except we've forgotten the law of the jungle and bend over for our overlords when any other animal would recognize the threat and fight to the death for their survival. Violence never solved anything is a statement uttered by cowards and predators. The tree of liberty and such, right? The difference here is, of course, we're not animals. We were given the ability to reason. We've also been told by the very entity who created us, you shall not murder. That's not an unclear command, nor is it a suggestion. The company CEO, Brian Thompson, ran a disgusting company in a disgusting way. They had the highest number of denials in the so-called insurance industry. All big insurance, all of it, 100% of it on the health side is utterly corrupt. They lobbied for Obamacare, which utterly corrupted our former healthcare system and turned it into a medical system. They sit on the boards of pharma, and pharma sits on their boards. They're the authors of the force you to purchase products you don't like from companies you don't, or for products you don't need, from companies you don't like, at prices you can't afford, for services you'll never, ever want. Heck of a business model. And when you start down the path of people for that, you will be murdered too. Maybe not you, but your neighbors. Because it's easy enough then to take that standard and say, well, you know what? I really don't like fire departments. They're loud and those fire engines get in my way and I have to pull over. So I'm going to start firemen. I mean, that's how this goes. So there's a reason that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So what happens if I murder? Well, if you don't repent, you go to hell. And you will spend eternity apart from anything good. No patience, no kindness, no love, no temperance, no self-control, no empathy, no joy ever again. Just the opposites of those. Actually, the opposite would be nothing. Just anger and conceit and self-interest and rage. That's what you spend eternity in, and it multiplies every year forever. Every day it gets worse. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. But as Christians, we don't just not go murder people because we don't want to go to hell. There's also the command to love your brother. And there's this: he who gives mercy will receive it. These so-called insurance companies should be burned down legally. Legally. And there's a whole lot of ways that we can have that discussion, as we've had many, many times on the show. I'm watching as some in the Mockingbird media are doing a lot to defend this action. They're trying to be clever about it, but they're trying to defend it. They took an opposite path with Daniel Penny. Taylor Lorenz did not say, can you see why we need more Daniel Pennies? Can you see why he is being defended? In fact, the moral outrage from the left, now that Daniel Penny is not going to go to prison, is palpable. If you ever look at the Blue Sky social media site, which is now the liberal answer to Twitter, it's filled with people saying, here you go, that's racism. Here you go, this is Trump land. Here you go, this is MAGA. Here you go, the prosecutors were afraid. The jury was afraid. They were going to be threatened. The Ku Klux Klan was going to come and get them. Just contrast and compare the two. a CEO of a brutally corrupt company who ran it, in my judgment, in a corrupt way. He didn't think so. He thought he was serving his shareholders. He thought he was providing for his family, and he was. I don't think he thought he was Dr. Evil. He's walking down the street, perfectly legal, running the company the way his shareholders wanted him to, which is deny as many claims as you possibly can, no matter what you have to do. He's shot down and murdered, dies. And there's the defense. Well, we can understand it. I haven't seen anyone from the Mockingbird media say, well, we can understand why Daniel Penny did what he did. He remained calm. He went into a circumstance. I don't believe for 5 seconds that Daniel Penny intended to take a life. I think he intended to save many, many lives. And let's talk for a second in a bit about what it would be like to have no Daniel Pennys. I said at the top of the show, I've never been a Daniel Penny. I've never engaged in something like that. I've drawn a gun one time to defend my daughter, and at another time in a skating rink, we saved the life of I think she was about 5, a 5-year-old girl. We absolutely saved her life. I'll talk about that in relation to Daniel Penny's or lack of Daniel Penny's here in a second. In the holiday season, there is a tendency for people to have a range of emotions. Some people are so joyful in the holiday season, and Christmas is such a time for them. They're the people who have all their lights up and all their gifts bought, and they love Christmas music. And if you're that person, God bless you. That's beautiful. They're the people who face depression during this holiday, and I want to just recognize that. Sometimes this is very hard for people. There's a population of people who get unbelievably stressed out, and they allow themselves to get stressed out maybe because of the things of the world. Is the tree tall enough? Does it have water? Do we have enough gifts? Do we have enough food for people visiting? Are we going to make it there on time? Are the planes going to be on time? Are my kids going to like the gifts? All this stuff adds up. There's the money. My gosh, the money we're spending. Here's a little tool that can get you through the holidays with less stress. It is from Bioptimizers. It's Magnesium Breakthrough. Magnesium Breakthrough, yes, it helps with sleep. It helps with regularity. It's 7 forms of organic magnesium. It's not the fake synthetic magnesium you'd find in any of the China marts, any of the big retail stores. It's organic, full spectrum. And it helps alleviate stress by controlling the stress hormone cortisol. Cortisol's up, stress is up, cortisol is down, stress is down. Furthermore, too much cortisol can make you fat. So do this. Go to bioptimizers.com/Todd. Use promo code Todd to save an extra 10% on Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers. That's bioptimizers.com/Todd, promo code Todd for an extra 10% and maybe a more calm Christmas for you. Life without Daniel Penny. We'll explore this in the second show we do today, the 3 stories version. We'll explore it in depth with some actual examples of cases where it would have been great had there been a Daniel Penny nearby. Why am I asking about life without Daniel Penny? Well, thank God he's been acquitted, or at least not found not guilty. They can't convict him. So double jeopardy like, he is not going to go to prison. Oh, the family of Daniel, the family of the guy who died, they're going to sue him. They've already announced there's going to be a civil case. These are the same people who abandoned him to the street, have woken up and now they smell money. So they're going to go try to ruin Daniel Penny financially. And maybe the transit organizations, the police department, etc. So you think a lot of people looking at this say, you know what? I want to be on trial for 2 years. I want to be taken out in handcuffs. I want to be paraded in front of the world and called a racist. I want to sit in front of a jury while the prosecutor calls me the white man. And he calls the person who died the black man. Because that's what they did. They called Daniel Penny the white man. This, of course, is under the offices of the unbelievably corrupt Alvin Bragg. And you remember him, right? So he's the guy who magically turned felonies into misdemeanors and then turned around and did the opposite to President Trump. A bookkeeping misdemeanor, he blew up into 44, 45 felonies. He's utterly corrupt. He has no business being a lawyer. He should be disbarred. Had Daniel Penny not been on that train, then I guess everything would have been fine until it's not. The threats that the guy who died, I don't want to say his name either, because I don't want his family to have this fame. They're going to try to turn him into a George Floyd. They're going to try in this civil trial to make it seem like they'd always cared about this man. They didn't care about him. Or at least there was no evidence that they did. I can't read their hearts. So maybe things would have been fine, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes you need a Daniel Penny. If you've ever been in a city like Seattle or San Francisco and you see a psychotic homeless person who's probably in a drug-induced psychosis go from acting out to grabbing people or stabbing them, or have instances that happen with some near regularity in the separate countries of Seattle or Portland. There was a woman who was gardening. She had a little tiny community garden. She lived in downtown Seattle. She grew flowers in these tiny little squares around the trees, just flowers, just to beautify the neighborhood. She's out there one day. She's bent down. She's gardening. She's in her 80s. And a street guy in his late 20s decided to go kick her face in. So he walked up to her. He booted her in the side of the face. He broke her jaw, and he continued to kick her in the face until he was done kicking her in the face. Then he walked away. Oh, yeah, no, there were people there. But no one did anything because there were no Daniel Pennies. See, a world without Daniel Pennies is a world with more like that. I think that woman survived, but only barely. I can relate to you this thing that happened to us. And it was at a skating rink, and my daughter and her friends were skating, both blonde girls, both probably at that point about 8 or 9 years old, maybe a little older, maybe 10. And a guy who'd been going to this skating rink for a very long time, was actually a really good skater, could skate backwards, forward, could dance when he skated, older dude, never seemed like a creep until a certain point he decided to start playing with the girls. I saw this for the first time when he was skating around trying to engage in a game of tag with a family I knew from the speed skating days. And the girls were uncomfortable and the family was uncomfortable. I thought, yep, keep that one on the mind. Men don't invite themselves to touch 13 and 14-year-old girls in a game of tag. You don't do that. So this guy was at the skating rink when my daughter was there with a friend. And he decided to go play tag with them. And they didn't want that. So I was about to go out on the floor, but my daughter and her friend skated over to me and said, this guy is creeping on us. I said, just stay away from him. So they did their best to stay away from him, and they'd skated across the skating rink, and they sat down over by the skate rental area. And I skated that way, and that man came up and sat down right next to my daughter, his shoulder on her shoulder. And I came over and said, get up. He goes, I'm just sitting with my friends. I said, that's my daughter. They're not your friends. Get up. So he got up. Tried it again on a skate bench on the other side of the rink. Went to go sit right by them. So I skated over and said, let me be clear with you. You are not to be near my daughter. You're not to talk to her. I don't want to see you looking at her. If I see you looking at her or talking to her, I will come for you. So he got up and he skated away. And he stayed away from her. It was about time that we were going to leave because my skates were off. I was collecting my daughter, telling her to get her skates off. When I walked near the exit to the skating rink, and that man had his hand gripping the hand of a 4 or 5-year-old little girl. He was in his skates. She was in hers. He was headed to the exit. He was going to leave with her, skating right up to the door. Praise God that I was standing there. So I stopped him. I said, where are you going? Oh, who is this? She's my friend. What's her name? Oh, her mom's my friend. What's her name? And all of a sudden, this mom screams from the snack bar area, that's my kid. Let go of my kid. And she came running down. And the little girl went over to her mom. I said, do you know this man? No. Oh, well, you're my friend. You live in, I've never seen him. All right. You don't know who he is. No. All right. So this guy started to try to leave. I said, you're not leaving. You're not going anywhere. Oh, and he skated out the door. So he's not going anywhere. My friends, one of whom was a senior official at the Department of Homeland Security and was armed, other who was an undercover cop was armed, other who was a veteran combat vet was armed, another who was a firefighter was armed. I was armed. We all went out into the parking lot. And the owner of the skating rink, there was a husband and wife who owned it. Kay came out. Kay was screaming at him, I have you on video. I have this whole thing. Don't let him leave. I have him on video. He grabbed her off the floor. We were watching you. So we surrounded his car. My friend Steve pulled his truck right up behind him. My friend Paul pulled his truck beside him. I said, you're not going anywhere, man. And he tried to walk away. I said, look, you're not going anywhere. Understand, everybody here has a firearm. Everybody you're looking at is armed. You are not leaving. We've already called the cops. They're going to handle it. So I'll tell you in a second how this all came out. Then we'll get to this stuff about the Mockingbird media and how to handle them, because President Trump has done a pretty good job. So have some other people. So I'll tell you how this completes itself, because it could have been catastrophic. Praise God for my friends at UnitedHealthcare, because a longtime family family member back in the Seattle local radio days, now as a podcast family member, they went down to Puerto Vallarta to get stem cell treatment. And at UnitedHealthcare, you've heard me talk about this. This is where I got my shoulder done. My right shoulder recovered 1,000 times faster than my left. I got my ankle done. I'm going back probably this time for lower back stuff. They use ethically gathered stem cells only from placentas and umbilical cords. The strain of cells I use have never been ever touched by the modified RNA injections. They don't just do that. They put you in a hyperbaric chamber, the biggest one, by the way, in North America. They manufacture their own oxygen because they refuse to have questions about their supply chain. They want to know exactly where it came from. They do these AZT injections, all of it, to instantly fight inflammation. And those stem cells are utterly amazing. They rebuild the human body. They can build cartilage. You might not need surgery. They rebuild tendons and muscles. You might not need surgery. And if you have to have surgery, you can recover quickly. So praise God for that. This family went down. They got the stem cells. They were thrilled at the result. And then the people at Renew looked at some tests they did. And they told the lady, you need to get heart surgery today. They checked with the heart surgeon. They showed this to other colleagues. She was given 3 stents that day at a world-class hospital in Mexico, which is right next door to the Renew Clinic, and she flew home to Seattle. She may have died had they not done that. See, they're not just in this for the money. It's a money-making business, and it's outside the insurance equilibrium. Why is that important? Because guess what? If they'd been hooked up to the pharma insurance thing, they couldn't have made that recommendation. They could have got sued. But they did it because it was the right thing to do. See if they can help you. Go to renew.healthcare. It's RENUE.healthcare. RENUE.healthcare. Please tell them that you're part of the Todd Herman Show family, and they'll tell you if they can help you. It's RENUE.healthcare. We'll get to the Mockingbird media stuff here. So we go and we surround this guy's car, and the police arrive. We had, let's see, a Washington State Patrol car, we had a sheriff's deputy, and we had the Federal Way Police. Federal Way Police were there first. They were just right around the corner. So they show up, all of us with guns, have our hands up. Our hands up, and the cops come around. Anyone here armed? All of us are armed. And my friend Russ pulls out his federal badge. So he brings it out. It's on the necklace. So, okay, all right, officer, come up here. And they had us, all the rest of us stand back. Kay's there screaming, I've got video. The cops are, okay, we know you got video. So it turns out this guy was on the offender watch list. Turns out he was level 3. Turns out he'd violated his own parole because he wasn't supposed to be around kids or in places kids congregate. Turns out that gave them probable cause to search his car. They opened the trunk. It contained lye, garbage sacks, zip ties, and cutting tools. And I'm standing there looking at this, and I turned to one of the officers and I said, "Is that what I think it is?" He goes, "That's a kit." If he had gotten that little girl into that car, I said to the cop, he goes, "Yeah, she'd be gone." We were there. We weren't at any risk from this clown. But in a world without Daniel pennies, how did these things turn out? Alvin Bragg has done so much damage to the state of law and order in New York, and the Mockingbird media, who's held water for him, have aided him in this damage. And again, look at the comparison. Brian Thompson, a CEO who was, in fact, providing for his family, who I'm sure thought he was doing a good job, who I'm sure thought that UnitedHealthcare was a fine company. I'm sure he was convinced of that. I stand adverse to that. I think that UnitedHealthcare is a disgrace. I think that most insurance companies in America aren't insurance companies. They're rackets. And I'm not going to go murder someone for that. But this instinct to defend his alleged murderer. These are the same people whose instinct is to attack Daniel Penny. And I'm here to tell you, outside of their well-guarded buildings, they're not going to be Daniel Pennies on their own. I don't know any of us. Well, there's probably a lot of you in the audience, in the podcast family, who can be a Daniel Penny. I don't think I can. Unless it involves having a gun or a CrossFit competition. Hey, let's have a CrossFit competition, bad guy. The media is destroying itself. Republicans and young adults are now more likely or just as likely to trust information from social media as from national news organizations. Well, that makes sense in that some of it is sourced from local news organizations, and you get a lot of stories that will not be discussed in the Mockingbird media. But if you look at the way this is precipitously dropped, Republicans used to trust the media, national media organization, more than social media, 79 to 80%. It's down to 66% now. It's a little bit better on local news. All U.S. adults, it's trending down. Of course, Democrats no longer trust social media. It's trending the other direction. Because, of course, the very, very evil Elon Musk now owns Twitter-X. And the Mockingbird media, they can't help themselves because they've got personalities like Kristen Welker. This is a fantastic way to handle the Mockingbird media. If I could deliver one area of coaching to President Trump in terms of talking to these people, and he doesn't need me, he's president, I'm not, he's a billionaire, I'm not, that if I could deliver one formative advice, it would be this: slow your speech down by about 2 beats and make sure you finish every thought, because some of these thoughts are so spot on. I just wish that they were a little slower and spoken not to Kristen Welker, but to undecided voters. Here is part of this conversation.
Let me ask you about another group of people, the estimated 4 million families in America who have mixed immigration status. So I'm talking about parents who might be here illegally, but the kids are here legally. Your borders are
You're talking about separation?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are two aspects to this. Your borders are, Tom Homan said, they can be deported together.
Correct.
Is that the plan?
Well, that way you keep well, I don't want to be breaking up families, so the only way you don't break up the family is you keep them together, and you have to send them all back.
It's a great answer. It's a fantastic answer. And I've noticed this. There is no concern about breaking up Daniel Penny's family. There was no concern about breaking up families when you were forcing people to be involved in a medical experiment, and you were forcing people into jail cells for that. So President Trump answered the question well, and he continued to answer the question well. Now, Kristen Welker, as she was doing this interview, what's she doing? She's being powerful. She's being famous. Not everybody gets to go out and interview the incoming president of the United States, once president and to be president again. They don't get to do that. Not everybody. She does. But she apparently doesn't like being rich and famous or powerful, because when she becomes part of the story, she panics. I'll show you this in a second, because Savannah Guthrie was there when Kristen Welker was doing this interview with President Trump, and she had some questions for Kristen Welker and the NBC team, and they didn't want to engage, which makes sense because they can't really engage because they don't have the wisdom to fear God. They don't have the wisdom to understand you guys are making yourself part of the story by your participation. It's gone beyond bias. It's now rigging. Wisdom's a vital, vital thing for us to have and to want more of. Solomon was once thought of as the world's wisest man. How did he get there? Because when he became king of Israel, he said to God, the one thing I want is wisdom. And God gave that to him, and then he abused it. I mean, he was human, right? He fell. He ended up going and getting a harem, and he sinned, and it was just so bad. And for a while, he was the wisest man on earth. Wisdom is something to deeply value. There's a product I ran across that caught my attention because I saw the podcast of the doctor who created the product. His name is Dr. Patrick Gentempo. And I saw his podcast. I was looking at health freedom stuff and food freedom. I was looking into the regulation of supplements, which maybe under President Trump and RFK Jr., maybe this isn't going to happen. But there's been this effort to ban a lot of perfectly legal, perfectly good supplements because the government wants us all on pharma. Anything that we can have that they can't patent, they don't want us to have. I don't think this is patented. I don't know that it can be, but it's called Wisdom, and it's a biblically based herbal blend. So Dr. Gentempo was in the Holy Land. He was walking where Jesus walked, and he was inspired by reading the Bible and realizing how many times sacred herbs and spices are mentioned and how many times they're tied to health of the soul, health of the body. So he designed this product to be biblically based and then scientifically created. This product is infused with light waves and sound waves. It's cold brewed, and it is created in small batches. Why? To maintain the potency. So what's it deliver? Detoxification, healthy response to inflammation. You can use inflammation to your advantage if you're supplementing in the right way. Mental clarity, better sleep, sense of calm, relief from stress. And by the way, the product is something that tastes fantastic. This I didn't expect because I tell you, the first time I tried this, had it in front of me, it's in the squeezer, like, oh, this is going to be awful. Actually, it tastes great. My daughter puts it in her coffee, so she still gets the lift from coffee, but she doesn't get that jagged edge. You can try this right now and get what I got, which is this amazing experience. So just click over to trywisdomnow.com/Todd. When you go there and you purchase, you will get 33% off. They will give you free shipping and a 180-day money-back guarantee. It's trywisdomnow.com/Todd. Trywisdomnow.com/Todd. Dang it, now I want to eat that again. It's so good. So outside of the area where Christian Welker had done her assault of President Trump, rhetorical assault, and lost, Savannah Guthrie was there. And Savannah Guthrie with Turning Point USA had some reasonable questions for the staff of NBC News, starting with Christian Welker. If you're looking at the video service, watch Christian Welker's face when she realizes that one of her colleagues has a question about some NBC coverage.
Excuse me, Kristen, I have a question. NBC reported that when Trump was attempted, it was popping noises that was initially reported. Would you like to respond to that? No? Yep. All right, y'all, this is Savannah Hernandez, and this is actually Kristen Welker right behind me of NBC News, the exact same network that reported after the attempt at Donald Trump that it was just popping noises. Kristen, would you like to say anything? No? Would anybody a part of NBC like to say anything about your faulty reporting? Not at all? Okay. So that's your mainstream media, ladies and gentlemen. And we have CNN here, we have MSNBC, we have NBC. So this week, I'm really going to try to ask all of these media members what their response is to their networks and this faulty reporting.
Love it. You're in the public eye, you're famous, and you're powerful, and you don't want to answer questions. Now, here's a dynamic that exists with media that I don't think they understand. They can reach into the life of a private person, and they can destroy them. For instance, do you remember CNN dispatching people across the country because someone had posted something on Facebook that we were told was Russian propaganda? Do you remember that woman in her farmhouse? I want to say it was in Montana or it was somewhere in the middle of the country. She's in her farmhouse, and a reporter from NBC News from New York comes and knocks on the door, and she opens it. Yes, sir? Did you know you posted something from a Russian bot farm? A bot farm. Russian propaganda. Pardon me, sir? This woman's cooking up second breakfast for hardworking people. And they reach in and they put her picture on TV, and she's a racist. She's a Russian troll. You think of the incidents that happens now that there's actually been traction on. A young kid goes to the Capitol with his school, and there's a leftist activist there who's trolling him, and all of a sudden that kid's a racist. Now, at least in that case, the media had to pay a toll. There needs to be more of this. Kristen Welker should have to answer these questions. Now, we can't force her, but it's so indicative that when the cameras are turned on them, they don't want to interact. Sometimes they can't defend their networks. Sometimes they know they can't put up with these questions, but they'll aim them at you. Look again at Daniel Penny. Are we going to see the media now turn around and make him the interest story? I mean, he's not been found guilty. He's been let go. They could not convict, nor should they have been able to. So are we going to see them now treat him a little bit differently? After all, he's not any longer pending charges. I don't think so. President Trump handled this media very, very well. He calls Kristen Welker out for what she's doing. She's being hostile.
The press, I can't say treated her unfairly. You know why? Because she's very popular.
He's talking about Kamala Harris.
But think if the press was unfair, like to me, the press was obviously unfair to me. The press, no president has ever gotten treated by the press like I was. And yet I got more votes than any Republican candidate in history, by far. It's not even close. So you say, what's that all about? The press has to straighten itself out because, honestly, it's lost all credibility. When that can happen, based on the press, I should have gotten no votes. None. And yet I got the highest number ever. And the reason is because I'm able to go on a show, even like yours, even though you're very hostile, I'm able to go on a show like yours. No, you are.
Well, hopefully you thought it was a fair interview. We covered a lot of policy ground.
It's fair only in that you allowed me to say what I say. But, you know, the answers, the questions are, you know, pretty nasty. But look, because I've seen you interview other people like Biden. And
I've never interviewed President Biden.
When I say you, I'm talking metaphorically. I've seen George Stephanopoulos interview Biden, and he's a tough interviewer. It's the softest interview. I've seen CNN interview him. They give these soft, you know, what's your favorite ice cream? It's a whole different deal. I don't understand why. You know, you would think the press would like to see strong borders, great education, a powerful military, so we have a country left, and all these different things. And somehow they don't want to see that.
So Kristen Welker finds herself in this situation where President Trump is going to calmly, very, very, very calmly, in a nice way, state, you're nasty. Now, I would love it if he was armed with some specific examples, because he was saying people like you, got that, but some specific examples. That's not hard to come by with Kristen Welker. But he does a great job of handling the Mockingbird media. When he talks about her being nasty, we could shift over to one of her colleagues, Martha Raddatz. Remember Martha Raddatz? So Martha Raddatz had Byron Donalds on. They're also talking about the border. They're talking about immigration. Martha Raddatz is a member in good standing of the Mockingbird media, and she's not concerned about costs. Remember, she wasn't concerned about gangs taking over apartment buildings in America. Remember that? In Aurora, Colorado? Well, it's just a few apartment buildings. Remember that? She's not concerned about that or the costs to the property owners or the representatives of the property owner who looked like he got his nose broke by one of the cartel members. She's not concerned about the cost of $2,200 a month for illegal immigrants, $10,000 cash to have them move in, free hotels, free airplane flights. None of that concerns her. She's never once talked about the cost of that, the cost to our education system, our healthcare system, our prison systems. Never once. I've seen. But she is suddenly deeply concerned. She's become a budget hawk when talking to Byron Donalds.
A recent analysis found it would cost about $315 billion and take at least 10 years to deport everyone in the U.S. without legal status. You often talk about the need to cut government spending. So how is this mass deportation going to be paid for?
Well, but Martha, I will tell you, what we already know is that the cost of massive illegal immigration to the federal government, to state governments, and to local governments is more than $150 billion per year. So if you're going to say that it's cost us $300 billion over a decade to repatriate illegal aliens to their home country versus the American taxpayer having to pay more than $1 trillion over the same decade to keep those illegal aliens in the United States, that is a savings to the American people. And so it is important that, yes, we are going to have to use resources to repatriate these people back to their countries where they belong, but it pales in comparison to the costs of massive illegal immigration in the United States, not just with trying to subsidize people living here, but it's also the crime that has occurred. You could bring up Rachel Nungari, with the tragedy happened to her, Lake and Riley, the tragedy that's happened to her, not to mention the displacement of the American people in their own cities when it comes to resources by rampant illegal immigration. As far as I'm concerned, this is a savings for the American people.
Every time you engage with Martha Raddatz and she does something like that, please bring back the question of the year. To me, this is the question of the decade to the Mockingbird media. It's J.D. Vance after Martha Raddatz had said, well, it's just a couple of apartment buildings being seized by violent drug cartels.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs?
This should be the approach every time. Kristen Welker, do you hear yourself? Drug cartels separate families all the time. They bring in little kids to this country, sometimes to be housed in strip clubs. Do you hear yourself? You think I'm the one separating families? I don't want to do that. I have a country to protect. Savannah Guthrie with Kristen Welker. Do you see yourself? You ask everybody else questions, but one is directed at you and you run away? You talked about the sanctity of the press and free speech. You can't just turn around and defend your network. You have to have the silent treatment. To the leftists who are saying that Daniel Penny should now be destroyed in civil court. The same leftists, in many cases, who defended the murderer or alleged murderer of Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. Do you hear yourselves? Do you really hear yourselves? A couple other examples of this in just a second. Our Mike Lindell, friend of the show, we interviewed Mike, it was several years ago. And I was really nervous to ask him about his addiction issues. And I did ask him about the drugs, the alcohol, the gambling. And he told me this story. I'll have to find this interview and play it for you. Being in a dark apartment, sleeping on a couch, he had no possessions. The only thing he had, he was borrowing from friends. And he went to sleep under this huge weight, ruined his life. And God spoke to him, and he changed. He came out of this with this faith in Christ that drove him to say, you know what, I'm not doing it anymore. He leaned into God to eliminate the addictions, to go back and repay family. When he started MyPillow, he made a decision. I'm going to keep this company right here in this town where I became a laughingstock because of how I was acting, and he did it. Those pillows are still manufactured here. He's not a guy that you need to ask the question, do you hear yourself? He knows exactly what he's saying. He has a view on the elections. I happen to agree with his view on the elections. And that's cost him. It's cost him hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you remember when law enforcement came and seized his phone? Do you remember this? He was in line at a Chick-fil-A. A guy worth a couple $100 million is sitting in line to buy Chick-fil-A from his own car, not his people, him. And they came and he just handed him the phone. Here you go, do what you want to do. You don't have anything to hide. They're still going after him. A major retailer just this Christmas season canceled a massive order. So Mike is going to turn around and he's going to come to us as friends. We haven't talked about MyPillow in years. Hey, can you help me with this? Absolutely. We'll help you anytime, Mike. So what he's done is he's taken the classic MyPillow collection and he's applied prices that have never, ever been done before. The standard classic MyPillow is now $14.88. Queen size MyPillow is $18.88. King size is $19.88. Body pillows $29.88. And multi-use pillows are $9.88. He's doing something else. He's extending the money-back guarantee. If you purchase between now and December 25th, you have the money-back guarantee extended through March 1st of 2025. They've never been priced this way before, and Mike is known for his prices, so that's saying something. So go to mypillow.com/Todd. Use promo code Todd to get the standard MyPillows for only $14.88, the lowest price ever. Use promo code Todd for discounts on the entire MyPillow collection. That's mypillow.com. Enter promo code Todd. mypillow.com, promo code Todd. The media in our system was designed to help hold power to account. They were rhetorical Daniel Pennies. Their job was to do what we as a collective can't do. Part of their job is to hold power to account. They'd much rather churn their system on people to try to get the outcomes they want politically and to try to affect things socially. That's how they can pick a stranger out of a crowd and say, hey, let's turn this kid into a racist. Do you remember the little boy who went to a football game? Do you remember this? And the media decided that he was in blackface when in fact he was painted up as his favorite team. Do you remember when they turned him into a racist and shamed him? They reached into the life of someone who never bothered anybody, a little boy, and they did that. They can't stand when the questions are turned to them, and they can't help themselves. Kristen Welker asked President Trump if he's going to fire the current FBI director. She knew exactly the answer to this question.
Are you going to fire the current FBI director, Christopher Wray, who you appointed?
Well, I can't say I'm thrilled with him. He invaded my home. I'm suing the country over it. He invaded Mar-a-Lago. I'm very unhappy with the things he's done. And crime is at an all-time high. Migrants are pouring into the country that are from prisons and from mental institutions, as we've discussed. I can't say I'm thrilled. I don't want to be Joe Biden and give you an answer and then do the exact opposite.
We're going to talk about
So
that,
I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to say is I certainly cannot be happy with him. You take a look at what's happened. And then when I was shot in the ear, he said, oh, maybe it was shrapnel. Where's the shrapnel coming from? Is it coming from heaven? I don't think so. So we need somebody to straighten. You know, I have a lot of respect for the FBI, but the FBI's respect has gone way down over the last number of years.
Don't you have to fire him in order to make room for Kash Patel if he is, in fact, confirmed?
Well, I mean, it would sort of seem pretty obvious that if Kash gets in, he's going to be taking somebody's place, right? And somebody is the man that you're talking about.
Of course. Incidentally, if you as FBI director believe that President Trump is a felon and a national security risk, you have to resign. I mean, how can you continue to serve him or with him? Well, maybe you're going to be the adult guarding things. We started by talking about the alleged of the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, Brian Thompson. We don't say the name because that's what he wants. Well, he saw himself as what? I think he saw himself as the next Ted Kaczynski. I think it's going to become clear. That's a prediction I have. The Mockingbird media did everything they can, or many members, to defend his actions, or at least to make them understandable, to relatable. With Daniel Penny, they did the opposite. God created both of those guys. Both of them. Which one is the most godly act? UnitedHealthcare, in my judgment, is a disgusting company. We had a huge fight with them. When our daughter was constantly and doing annoying things like trying to kill herself and UnitedHealthcare said, yeah, treatment's not really necessary. Now, that was through a subsidiary of theirs, the Mormon Church, privately insured but administered through UnitedHealthcare. So UnitedHealthcare was part of this. Deny, deny, deny. So when I hired a group to help us get our money, it took us about 2 years. We eventually got a bunch of it back. But being without $400,000 for 3 or 4 years can flat hurt. So I don't think highly of UnitedHealthcare. And to walk up behind a guy and murder him is just that. It's murder. Can't be seen as godly. God created that murderer, and he created Daniel Penny. Is there any sign that Daniel Penny said, you know what? I want to go kill a homeless guy today, preferably a black man? Nope. Daniel Penny stopped that man from doing what he said he was going to do, which was to kill everybody on the train. Sad that he died. I don't think it's Daniel Penny's fault. I think it's a system that looked at the Daniel Pennies of the world and said, stand aside. Because love is going to solve this. Love in the form of letting people rot on the streets. That's not love. Certainly not biblical love. There's a reason that God created systems and methods on how to treat our body. Remain sober so Satan can't come and get you. Radically paraphrasing the Bible. This is the Todd Herman Show. Please go be well, be strong, be kind, and please make every effort to walk in the light of Christ.